All right, welcome everyone. My name is Chinere. Welcome to the Relentless podcast, and um, please like, share, subscribe because why not? Today I want to just talk about something that has become like a common question I get almost all the time. Not just a common question, but common DMs that I get where people tell me, Chinere, God said I'm going to migrate. And because I'm in Canada, as usually God said I'm going to migrate to Canada. And I don't know what to do from there. So the questions will come from, oh, usually, like the most common one is, but I don't have the funds. I don't have proof of funds. I don't know anybody in Canada. I don't know how to, the study route pathway is quite difficult. What if I don't get the visa? I don't even know where to start. I don't know how to put together an application and all and on. Oh, I'm really afraid of this or that. Usually it starts from the financial aspect. And so I decided to put this video together, not just because I want to answer the questions, but because I want to tell my own story. Because just a couple of years ago, that was also my situation where I knew that God had said it was time to move, and in my case, to migrate to Canada. So stick with me. Hopefully, this video will not be too long. And if I see that it's too long, I'm just going to cut it into two, do a part one, and then do a part two later. So if you have somebody who's also planning to migrate and it's like, I'm really trusting God because I don't know what to do, I don't have the funds, maybe a good video for you to share with them. Tell them, you know what, hear this person's testimony because why not? What you got to lose? Anywho, so in 2017, December of 2017, that was the first time I knew someone in Canada, forgive me, I don't think I'm going to pronounce the province properly or the city properly, Saskatchewan, who said, oh, you have a good result, like, and why not just try for Canada to do your master's, do a second master's? It was at the University of Saskatchewan at that time, and then he suggested it to me, and I was like, no, like I haven't heard God say I should travel, and I don't want to get into trouble. I don't want to start something that God didn't send me, and then start struggling to, make it work. He said, okay. That was around November or December, and he was trying to say, okay, his school applications were still open until February. I could try for it, and I said no. Now, as at 2017, I was I was doing my master's at the University of Ibadan, um, and I was a broke, as broke as the definition of broke student. I'm going to describe more about my brokenness as we proceed in the story. So in 2018, January, times of prayer and seeking God, and I heard the Lord say, "It's time." Like it's time to migrate. But then it's not just that I heard it, like, and when I say I heard it, like, I can't go into explaining how um, um, hearing God generally. I have a video on it on my as in on this channel, so you can check it out because I do a little bit of explanation of as in what my understanding of hearing God is and how you can train yourself to hear God. But it came with also a lot of confirmations. So for me, many of the three major ways in which I hear God is just a knowing in my spirit, my ability to discern what the Spirit of God is doing around me, and dreams. So I would have numerous dreams or confirmations, and then sometimes I would also have friends call me saying that they had a dream about me concerning a particular thing. That's not what happened in this instance, but I had dreams. I had the inner witness after I had spent some time in prayer, and then there were other signs that started coming up. So in 2018, like I said, in around January or so, I felt like this was what the Lord was saying to me. And like I said, this was me without a job. I had been working, of course, at this time I was a lawyer. I am a lawyer, qualified to practice on the Nigerian bar. But at this time when I felt like God was saying it's time to move, or it's time to migrate, I had left practice to go back to school to get a master's degree because I have a passion for teaching, and I just felt as in I want to teach. I still want to teach because I'm still like I'm doing my doctoral program now. But at that time I was like I can't I don't want it to be that what do you call it, that I'm wasting time just doing practice when in the meantime what I really want to do is teach, and I thought I could combine the two. So basically, my point is that I went back to depending on my parents because I had to tell them, oh, I'm going back to school, and my dad graciously agreed to still sponsor me, and I could have gotten a part-time job, but basically another thing about that period in my life is that there was a lot of work God was doing in my life. So I was kind of like in serving full-time in a ministry. I was serving as a church admin, as in 2018. I think at the beginning I had not yet started serving as a church admin, but I was doing a lot of outreaches, school outreaches. I was going to schools to teach, to preach, basically to preach, to tell them students about sexual purity, making altar calls. So I was doing this kind of stuff in 2018, and that was what I believe God wanted me to do in that season. So there was no room actually for me to work. And I, as in, really, I had a confirmation. I had confirmations from God, but it didn't stop. It didn't change the fact that I was broke. And when I said I was broke, some people, when they reach out to me, they say they don't have enough money. And when they say they don't have enough money, they probably have a job where the salary is their earning is like 100K, 200K, or 300K. I didn't have 1 naira. Like I didn't at this point in my life. I was finding it difficult to eat 3 square meals. And usually, when God just says you migrate, you automatically just feel like, oh, man is just going to fall from heaven. You're just going to wake up one morning with millions of naira in your account. But truthfully, at that time, I had started working in obedience with God, and that's one of the things people have to understand. The first step is not usually for you to start calculating what you have in your bank account. That would be a mistake. You know why it would be a mistake? Because you would start looking at yourself. Um, and me, it didn't even occur to me at that point to start calculating how much it would cost me to go. Like, because look at it from as in critically. It's like you are working in a company, and one day the boss tells you, oh, we're going to build a 10-story building, and it's going to cost, as in, and then he just says, let's start building. You're working for the boss of the company, of the CEO or whatever. Are you now going to go back to your office and start calculating how much it's going to cost you to go and build the house? That because that's what people do most times when they say, God told me I'm going to travel, and then they go and they start calculating how much they have and how much it's going to cost them to travel. Anywho, back to my story. I'm in this. I I tell my friend who had initially told me about the opportunities and about applying to his school. I said, okay, I feel the go ahead in my spirit that I should apply, and so he gave me some guidelines on how to apply. At this point, truthfully, I did not know anything about applying to Canada. I did not know that there was other options apart from funded admission because I was being guided by somebody at that time. And now that I look back at it, that's just how God orchestrated it for me. So I started writing a proposal, started trying to find a supervisor, started trying to, just put in some small, small things in place. I wasn't calculating money because, like I said, and I'm not even exaggerating, because at this time I was also living with my younger sister, so she knows me and her were the same people that hungry was. We could barely pay the school fees for UI at that time. Like it was a prayer point for me to even be able to pay school fees per term, and that school fees was not. It wasn't up to 100,000. I'm talking about somebody that could not eat three square meals some days because we would be so broke that if we go to any of the eateries or the canteens in UI and eat 200 naira or 250 naira, rice and meat, I will drink a lot of water. Why are you eating? Why are you eating by 8 a.m. when you know you are going to get hungry by 11 or 12? Why not eat by 11 so that it will carry you until like 4? By the time it's 4 p.m., when you are going, I was living at Abo, but the Abo is close to UI Gate. And usually in the evening, you would see a lot of people selling fried akara and bread. They will be selling fries and sometimes fish with some small small things, moi in the evening. And then there are other small small things like egg roll and all that. You buy 16 naira egg roll. It's not like now in Nigeria you will see 16 naira egg roll, but then you will see 15 naira egg roll and maybe small bottle of Coke. At that time, it was still like 100 naira and something. And you eat for the mid evening, because when it really gets dark, like for night food, usually we either buy moi moi 100 naira with 20 naira curry. Don't mind me that I'm going into all these details. I'm trying to show you where I was at the time God told me that I was going to migrate to Canada. So, going back to my story, I started my preparations in that manner. And the person who was helping me at that time, we were actually in a relationship, but then after a while, the thing didn't work. It fell apart. So, as me, I was so heartbroken. For some time, I kind of like neglected my application. I started in January, so my application was supposed to be. I was working towards putting in my application by September. And the way this my friend had framed the teaching, the way he had guided me, he had told me to avoid, as in some certain schools, because they're highly competitive, and you need to have done this, done that, done this. So he was telling me, go for schools like University of Victoria, go for schools like Saskatchewan. I don't know if that's the right thing to say now. Thinking about it, I feel like most schools in Canada are altogether competitive. But then, anyway, so I was just following him like, oh, this person stays there, this person has the experience, and he was on a funded master's program. And so I thought, okay, like that's the thing to do. But when it fell apart like 2 or 3 months after I started the application. So I almost abandoned it until a friend of mine asked me if I was crazy. She's like, are you crazy? How will you abandon your application because of man? So I went back and continued my application. At first, he was trying to guide me to apply for certain schools that would possibly give me funding and topics that he thought would possibly give me funding. Like, I had my area of interest had always been intellectual property because look at me. I'm an author. I like to teach and speak, and so I have always had an interest in intellectual property law, and that was what I'd researched on in my undergrad. But he was like, yeah, it may not be something that some schools will fund because it's not really like as topical. So he was telling me to write on topics like environmental, indigenous people's rights and stuff like that, women's rights, and but when it all fell apart, and I think also God was orchestrating a lot of things. But some of the things I'm talking about now are in hindsight. And at the time this thing was happening, it was like everything was falling apart. I didn't have anybody to help me. But when my friend motivated me and rebuked me, and also I feel like the Holy Spirit was also telling me this is not about anybody, this is about me sending you to Canada because you need to look at it from the kingdom aspect. And that's another thing that I will stop and point out. Usually, sometimes when people tell me God said I should travel, there's so much about them in the mix, in the complaints, in the talking, and not much about the kingdom. Understanding that why is God sending you abroad? It's not like God doesn't have a good plan for you to, have a better life, to go to a good country and all that, but God can prosper you anywhere you are. You don't need to go to Canada to prosper. There are people that are in Canada that are suffering, people in UK that are struggling, and they would have had better lives if they had stayed in Nigeria. That's just the truth. It's not about whether or not the economy is good or bad. There are people who are living like kings in whatever country they are in because where God places you, that's where He prospers you. So, if let me just say this, as in, if you're saying God sent you, let your eyes be upon the kingdom. Continue. Don't forget in the middle of everything that you need to you're doing and you're applying, and that God is the one sending you. You are a kingdom ambassador. This is not necessarily about you. So I, by the time it fell apart, I abandoned the initial topic that I had been trying to look at, because even for me, and I feel like every Christian should have the same mindset. Everything about my life, everything about what I want to do, I bring it before God in prayer. And of course, like I said, one of the ways God speaks to me is through discernment. And so if I'm trying to follow a particular route and it's not working, it usually means that or I don't feel peace about it. I'm trying to do something based on man's wisdom. Um, Paul said to the Galatians, "Oh, foolish Galatians, who has deceived you? How do you start something with God and try to end it with the flesh?" So I went back to God and I prayed about it, and in my spirit, I felt led to go back to my intellectual property um, area of interest. So I went back and I started reading. I abandoned the initial topic that I had been writing under this my friend. So It took me about 3 months to read, come up with a proposal topic. I had to do a lot of research on the internet, looking at other proposals, because at this point, I was at the point where nobody was really guiding me. But I had a little bit of an idea from him, so I read a lot. I got some samples of how to write an academic CV, putting a lot of things together, and then started trying to find my references. I remember speaking to another person who had newly migrated to Canada. It was a classmate of mine, and I was just saying, "Oh well, as in, you know how you're just saying it casually that yeah, I plan to apply and all that." And he said to me, he said, that one of the schools he had applied to was he wanted to apply to was the University of British Columbia, and that he heard that they don't take application fee as at 2018, that they don't take application fee. They had waived it for Nigeria because we were having some problems with, I don't know whether it was a banking problem or so, but it was difficult to check for people to make payments through the bank system, and that I thought there was just some complication, and so they waived the application fee for those applying from Nigeria for 2018. That was all I needed to hear. Now, I wasn't applying because this was one of the schools that I was advised against, because they said it's highly competitive to get into the law program and all that. But the only reason why I applied, first of all, once he said it, I went to check the school. I just checked the website to see the application process, and my spirit immediately was at peace with it. And also, I just felt I had nothing to lose. I wasn't going to pay application fee. I couldn't even afford the application fee. So I that's how I ended up applying to University of British Columbia. In fact, I turned in my application on the very last day. So I couldn't find a supervisor. I couldn't, like, this normal process of you reach out to somebody to ask the person to supervise you. I didn't have that time because it's at the last minute. I was running around looking. I tried to apply to two schools, so University of British Columbia, University of Saskatchewan, and I didn't have the application money for the second one. I had to tell my dad, and he was so angry with me. He was like, "Why are you trying to go abroad?" Because to them it was a pipe dream. You've not even seen the money to finish eating, and you're talking about going up. You've not even finished the program that you're doing. We've not even finished paying school fees. He was so angry. I pleaded. I said, "Let me just try." He finally was able to squeeze out money for me, and it was not even the complete money for me to pay for one school, that's University of Saskatchewan, while as in UBC. So all this time that I'm running around, the application was going to end on the 16th of December. Many times I felt like giving up, following up the lecturers who were supposed to write reference letters for me, back and forth, trying to find an extra person that would write that, back and forth. Anytime I wanted to give up, I would remember that God had said I should do it, and I wanted to obey God. At some point, the thing that was pushing me to do it is that, Lord, I want to be able to say I obeyed you. This is not about migrating. It wasn't as at 2020, 2017, 2018. Yes, people were migrating, but the Japa craze had not started like that. So it wasn't like the first thing on my mind was, I must Japa. At that point, it was more like, I need to obey God. I don't know where God is sending me to, but I need to obey God. And you need to understand, I was also living my life at that point, moving from one city to another, um, based on just instructions I had heard from God. So I'll stop and say this too. When people tell me also God has said I should migrate, I look at them and I speak with them and I realize you've not obeyed God in any other area of your life. And suddenly you want to obey God to travel to a new country without. I'm not saying that it is impossible to start building your faith from then. I'm saying that you should be considerate of the fact that if you have not been obeying God in the little things, now that He's giving you a big dream, it's not going to be so easy for you to just understand the steps of obedience. You need to soak yourself in the presence of God. You need to listen to messages that will build up your faith. Anywho, I applied on the 16th of December, just before the application closed, put in for British Columbia. I couldn't find a supervisor before then, so I just went on the website. They said, write names of two people that you think can supervise you. So I chose the person, the proposal I had then fell between medicine and IP, and bioethics and IP. So I chose a lecturer in bioethics, not even IP. So the first choice was bioethics, the second choice was intellectual property. I sent in my application, and then I sent the one for Saskatchewan. I didn't get the one for Saskatchewan. Already by January, I got a mail from them saying they were asking me for my results from UI since I had put it in that I was I was still in the process of doing my second master's degree, and they were like, "Well, they evaluate based on your last degree." I said, "So can I take it out because I'm not done?" They said no. They gave me a deadline to send in my degree, and there was nothing I could do. I hadn't finished at that time, and this was January 2019. So they basically gave me a rejection. Sorry about that. Oh, sorry. And while I was still struggling with that, reading from that rejection. Then University of British Columbia, a friend came as a friend I knew I had applied to that school told me, oh, he heard that another person had gotten admission already. The admission letter had come in, and I was like, what? I didn't get anyone. So I got a little bit confused. I was like, Lord, what's going on? I've gotten two rejections. I know you said I was going to migrate and stuff like that. So at this point, I did not know that University of British Columbia Law Program had three different streams. They had the research based, they had the LLM taxation and LLM common law, and that the admission letters came for the different. That's to show you how my own kind of application was. A lot of things I just did by faith. I just focused on the one that concerned me and the one that I knew, and I did it. Anyway, so I'd almost given up at this point. I was reeling from the disappointment of, I was confused. Nothing seemed to be working. At this point, also, like, I was waiting to graduate from school. Even the UI that I had gone to, there was some internal strike. My faculty wasn't, as in, they weren't looking like people that wanted to release us anytime. So everything was going wrong at the same time. I had moved to Lagos at this point, still believing that I had God. You know, I told you I am still somebody who just moves as the Spirit leads. Like, if I hear tomorrow God is saying, move to Ontario, I've carried my bag, I'm saying, making plans, okay, let's move to Ontario. And now these things I'm doing, it's like I don't have money, like I'm broke, I'm believing God, taking radical steps of faith. So at this point, my heart is broken because I'm confused. Like, why is it that it doesn't seem to be working when I think I heard God say, go? Anyway, I almost began to lose my faith because that's not the only thing that was going bad. First of all, the relationship did not work. Second, and I thought I heard God about that one. Now the school is not working. Now, as in the job I came to Lagos to find, I'd become a laughing stock and a mockery because there was nothing coming forth. Or so I thought. But this is not the podcast for me to talk about what was happening at that point. I'm gonna go back to my story. By April of 2019, I got the admission letter. I remember that night very clearly, as in just seeing this random mail and then them saying, "Congratulations, you'll be." Oh my God, this was like 3rd of April or something. I started running. I was in so much shock. It was at this point I suddenly realized you're going to pay school fees. But for that night, I was rejoicing. I was telling everybody. They were like, "Oh my God, so surprised." And then I looked at it and I saw that the name of the professor that I had put in had just written her name without ever contacting her. She had accepted to supervise me. And so after, by the next morning when my head started coming down, I looked at the admission letter and saw, okay, the breakdown of the school fees. And I was like, at this time, I said my school fees was about 8,000 Canadian dollars or so to be paid in 3 installments. But like I said, when you don't have up to 1,000 naira per week to eat, then you know that even the thought of paying 2,000 Canadian dollars sounded like, I don't know. Anyway, 3 days later, I got the funding letter from my school. My faculty had, as in, given me funding. So it was basically going to last, the funding was going to last for about 2-3 days for the duration of the program. So it was a 12 months, 24 months master's program. And so that one was now settled. I said, thanking God when the funding letter came, rejoicing. Like I said, I did not know the details of how the funding worked at that time. And that was the first step for me. That's how I got the admission. And okay, I'm just going to stop the video here because I will do a second video explaining the main part of it, which is my visa battle. And I will just say this at this point. I got 2 visa rejections before I finally got an approval. From 2019 to 2022, when I finally got into Canada, it was a battle of fate. And I'm saying this ahead of the second recording because I want people to understand. When people say God said I should do something, or God said I'm going to migrate, they make it seem like that means that it must happen immediately. That means that I'm going to migrate tomorrow, next 3 months. There's this impatience and urgency, and there's so much worry. And I'm not saying that worry is something that is not common or that I never worried. I'm saying that if God told you to migrate and you don't have the money, I think the first thing you should be thinking of doing, or the first step in the process, is for you to go back and ask God the blueprint. How can you hear God to go and not hear God how to go? So, but if you're saying that this is what the Lord said I should do, go and sit down before the Lord in prayer and get the blueprint. Because God knew that you did not have money before He said you were going to travel to a country that's thousands and thousands of miles away from where you live. God knew the kind of family you came from. And honestly, my family at that time, we are much better now. God has blessed us, God has blessed me, God has blessed my siblings. But at that time, we really did not have the funds to send anybody anywhere. Plain to talk about anything, it was just like, this is seemingly impossible in the situation that we were in then. And so when we got, as in, there was no proof of funds, there was no, so I wasn't even working, so there was nothing that, as in, could have helped me to have a landing pad at that point. But I'm going to tell the story of um, the story of me getting my visa in the next video, and not just the story of me getting my visa, but coming into Canada with only $300. My story of faith in being able to get accommodation, being able to get a job, and then getting my PhD admission. My story of faith of getting my PhD admission, and how I finally was able to, get a breather in Canada. So, um, yeah, once again, if this video blessed you, please like, subscribe, share, and watch out for part 2, because it's coming very, very soon.